Welcome back. The Justice Department has dropped a case against a U.S. veteran who set an American flag on fire last year. Jay Carrey was arrested last August after burning the flag across the street from the White House in protest of President Trump. Our legal expert, Whitney Traylor, is here to explain what this means. And I know there were some other charges in this case, but let's start with this guy and why he was arrested.
Yeah, so he was ultimately charged with actually 2 misdemeanors, and he wasn't charged for burning the flag. He was charged for, he burned them in Lafayette Park, which is governed by the National Park Service. So they charged him with 2 misdemeanors, one for burning, starting a fire in an undesignated area, and the other for damaging personal property. So that was in protest to President Trump's executive order on the same day, August 25th of last year, saying that flag burning, that he wanted the DOJ to prosecute that, even though the Supreme Court has said otherwise.
And that park, of course, right by the White House there.
Yes.
So flag burning itself is not a crime.
That's correct, Kim, and a lot of people don't know that, and as we were just talking about.
As offensive as it might be, it's not a crime.
Right, that's exactly right, because the First Amendment gives us certain freedoms from the government. One of the most important freedoms is the freedom of speech. So they can only regulate speech in certain instances. Well, the Supreme Court in 1989, in a case Texas v. Johnson, said flag burning is symbolic speech. And so that right is protected. The Supreme Court has affirmed that since then. So that is a well-protected right, and it's really at the heart of a democracy to be able to dissent. And that is really, some people would consider, the ultimate form of dissension.
Right, and so at the heart of a democracy that it's been written into pop culture. If you haven't seen the movie American President, I would suggest it. It's a good one. But in that, line sticks out in my mind, and I looked it up. Michael Douglas, who plays the president, says, "You want to claim this as a land of the free, then the symbol of your country cannot just be a flag. The symbol also has to be one of its citizens exercising its right to burn that flag in protest." And while, as Kim points out, as distasteful as that might look to, and feel to a lot of people who fought and died for that symbol, what they were writing into that script follows what the Supreme Court said. Your right as an American has to be that, or it ceases to become America. So how does that now comport with a real president's executive order?
Well, the executive order is not necessarily a law. It is just to direct these various federal agencies. And so I went back and reread the executive order today, and it really doesn't have any teeth. And it actually referenced the 1989 case, Texas v. Johnson, and it said, I'm directing the Department of Justice to prosecute to the fullest extent that they can, which doesn't really mean anything. They can't prosecute. That is not a crime to burn the flag. So essentially he was saying, this is sacred. We don't want people to do this. Go after them, DOJ. But like, again, in this instance, it was these 2 misdemeanors because they couldn't charge him for burning the flag. So they went forward on these misdemeanors for starting a fire in an undesignated area and that type of thing. So that executive order doesn't have a lot of teeth, but it's symbolic. And now we just found out one of the reasons we're doing this case is because last Friday, the DOJ moved to dismiss the U.S. attorneys moved to dismiss those misdemeanors.
So it's almost like they were finding something to charge him with.
Yes, that's right.
So is that why they're saying, okay, the federal prosecutor's like, okay, no.
Right. That's a great point. And some people said, this is a solution where there is no problem. And the federal prosecutors haven't identified exactly why they have dismissed it, but many experts are saying, well, this is an end around, and so it still will have the effect of chilling free speech, because even though they're not going after him for the flag burning, it's essentially tied up, and the courts don't like that. So they suspect that they would have probably lost it. The court may have dismissed it anyway. So that's why people are assuming they dismissed those charges.
Look, it's a sensitive issue. There are people, as I said, that fight and die, under that flag, and they come home in flag-draped coffins.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, whereas I wouldn't do it because I find it distasteful, it doesn't mean it's a violation of the law.
Right.
It's kind of like listening to free speech that you don't like, but still saying, hey, you have the right to say that.
That's right. And really, I mean, this country was founded on a rebellion. Dissension is at the heart of a democracy, and really protecting offensive expression affirms the very freedoms that are symbolized by the flag. So a lot of people, it is distasteful, particularly in the military, and I understand that. My father was in the military, and I have the flag that was on his coffin, and so it has. I never had an affiliation with the military. I never really felt that closeness, but that flag is very dear to me. And some people who have years and generations of being in the military, I can understand that. But again, these are the freedoms that you're going to protect. This is what President Trump was saying about Iran, that, hey, the people need to protest. They're killing the people. They don't have a voice. And here, that is one of the fundamental tenets of our democracy, is that we do have those rights.
Well, that was a good speech. I almost wanted to hear the Star-Spangled Banner kick in right after that. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
we should
Whitney.
say thank you for your dad's service.
Yes,
Thank
exactly.
You. All right.